You are listening to episode number 88 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Today we are talking with Ben Doran, November 8 Bravo Delta, and we're talking about NVIS, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis, my call sign is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and I am your host for this podcast. This podcast is released every Thursday. You can find the show notes for today's episode at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/88. Now, on the show notes, they're going to have all of the different links and stuff we're going to talk about in today's episode, as well as some additional information, some pictures, and stuff like that. Because this topic is kind of a different when it comes to, I guess, maybe understanding it a little bit, because it's still kind of foggy to me, maybe a little bit. I just don't see how it works. I'm not an engineer, so maybe that's why it just doesn't, I don't know. Anyways, we're talking with Ben Doran today, and his call sign is November 8 Bravo Delta, and he was nice enough to come on and talk to us about NVIS. Now, I've heard about NVIS several months ago, and it sounded kind of neat to me because, you know, I'm pretty well into emergency communications, and that's kind of things that I do, right? So when I found out, you know, I can talk anywhere between 30 and 400 miles on a radio, yeah, okay, you can possibly typically do that with standard type setup, you know, with the beam or whatever on 80 meters or something like that. Yeah, you probably can. But if you don't have that high dollar beam and that, you know, rotate the rotor and the tower and it up certain level and stuff like that, then, you know, this is a different way to do it. And, you know, what makes NVIS so neat is that you don't have to have, you know, the high dollar stuff. You can have a random wire, you know, cut it to approximate length of whatever frequency you're going to use, the 80 or the 40 meters or whatnot. Cut it to that approximate length and put it on a T-post or, you know, a tripod stand or something like that. You know, cut it to whatever, let's see, 20 meters is like 30 feet or something like that. So cut it to like 60 feet or whatever the 40 meters is, and, you know, put it on tripods or something about 5 foot up and put a plastic flag on it so people don't walk into it or something like that. But, you know, it's great for emergency type communications because pretty much anywhere except for maybe the state of Texas, you know, you can talk on the NVIS style of operating and pretty much talk all over the state. Now, granted, here in Texas, you probably could, you know, with the Emergency Operations Center in the center of the state, and that could at least potentially talk to all the state, but you couldn't talk from one side of the state to the other. Just too big. But anyways, you know, we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I wanted to make sure and let y'all know about this, okay? I wanted to tell y'all this first off so you hear about it. Hopefully you're not skipping through this part. This episode is going to be releasing on the 28th, okay? This is going to be the last episode that I'm going to have a weekly. So after this episode, the next episode won't be for 2 weeks, and that's going to be on the 12th. October the 12th is when the next episode will be after this one. And we are bringing back Vance Martin from last week's episode. Vance Martin, November 3 Victor Echo Mike. We are bringing him back, and we're going to talk about the worldwide flora and fauna, which is kind of like a extension or a continuation of the national parks on the air from what I understand about it. But anyways, he's going to be back. I also have a new item from West Mountain Radio that we're going to be talking about. It's their brand new power gate, I believe is what it's going to be. I don't have all the information in front of me, but stick around next episode to learn about that. Also, last thing before we get to the interview here, y'all, I promise. I'm sure you've probably seen on Twitter, on Facebook, stuff like that. All the signs that I've been making. I'm making quite a few of them so far this month. Well, this episode comes out on the 28th. And my special launch deal, 50% off of your wood plaque, ends on the 30th, y'all. So it's like 2 days from now. So if you want to get in on this special, this 50% off deal, you need to act now. Go to the swag store, everythinghamradio.com/swag store, and buy your plaque. Definitely do it. Do it now. Okay? Alright, so I think I've used up enough of y'all's time. Let's go ahead and get on to what y'all came here to listen to, right? Alright, let's go ahead and get to the interview with Ben. Hey everybody, we are here with Ben Doran, November 8 Bravo Delta, and we are going to talk about NVIS, or Near Vertical Incidence, I can never say that word, Skywave. Anyway, so Ben, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Ben Doran. I'm November 8 Bravo Delta. I was, first licensed back in 2007. And I've just kind of been enjoying the ham program or ham hobby since then. I became general and extra. I sat down and took the test, both tests at the same time in 2009. And in 2013, I got my vanity call, November 8 Bravo Delta, and that's where I'm at today.
Awesome. So are you enjoying the hobby?
Yeah, I've come back into it more, recently. Several years ago, I was big into it back when it first started in 2007, 2009. My buddy, Craig, KD8FYT, he was kind of the driving force to get me into the hobby, and we were active there for a while. And, just kind of fell out of the hobby for quite some time, and then I don't know, probably around 2015 or 16, I've started to get back into it again, and pick back up and started to listen to some of the ham radio podcasts and become more interested and more active.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about what NVIS actually is. So what can you kind of give us a kind of like a general overview of somebody that has no idea what it is? What is NVIS all about? Okay,
well, NVIS or Near Vertical Incidence Skywave is a style of propagation. What you're basically doing is, with any dipole or, wire antenna up in the air, you've got a radiation angle where your waves are leaving the antenna. And generally, the higher off the ground the antenna is, the lower that radiation angle is. So you can get, kind of like if you're taking a rock and you're skipping it out across a pond. Mm-hmm. What you're doing, the higher you get your antenna up there, you're lowering that angle so you can kind of skip your radio waves right across the ionosphere.
Right.
With Near Vertical Incidence Skywave, you're actually trying to raise that radiation angle. So you bring your antenna generally really low to the ground, and that fires your signal almost straight up and brings the signal straight back down, and maybe a 30 to 400 mile radius around you. So it's really good for local contacts, or, if you're working down in a valley or something like that, you can kind of get your signal up and back down to the people that are near you.
So basically, I guess, the closer to the ground you are, the worse, or the more vertical your signal is going to be. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. I would say the optimum range, they say, is somewhere around 1/8 of a wavelength. But really anything lower than that is definitely considered near vertical incidence. So there's some other, I guess the closer you bring it to the ground, the better, or the more straight up and down your signal's going to be.
So is there like maybe a certain way that you need to put your setup? I mean, is it like better to have it, like really low to the ground, like, foot off the ground or something like that, or how far should you put your antenna first off?
I guess that's kind of, like I said, anything below 1/8 of a wavelength is going to give you this effect. Beyond that, I don't feel that anything I've ever done with it has really made a huge difference. Um, I've run them as low as maybe a foot off the ground to, up to 6 to 8 or 10 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I think the biggest issue you want to think about is whether or not someone's going to come along and trip on it, or if it's a more permanent antenna, whether or not some deer or something are going to come by or animals are going to get into it. You probably want it up at least 8 feet, so that way, people and animals can clear underneath it without getting hung up in it.
Right. So, is there like I know with regular antennas, you have like a grounding system or a ground plane or whatever. But with it being that low, is there a certain way that you need to do the grounding for it?
Well, I would suppose this is a horizontal antenna, not a vertical antenna, so you're not going to have a ground plane per se. If you're using just a dipole, and that's the other thing. This is more of a style of propagation and not so much an antenna. You can use dipole antennas. You could use a random long wire. Any antenna that you bring close to the ground where you're going to change that takeoff angle. So if you're using, say, a dipole, you've already got the counterbalance, or if you're using a long wire, you'll have the counterpoise on it acting as kind of your ground system. I mean, you still want to have it properly grounded at your feed point, or where you would normally ground it if you have a tower or whatever. But yeah, you're basically using the ground like the reflector on a Yagi antenna, and just shooting that signal straight up. And then it bounces off the sky and comes straight back down in kind of a cone shape, you'd think. So your polarization isn't as big of an issue if you and your friend are both set up, within that 400 miles or so. It doesn't really matter if you're both oriented north to west or north to south and east to west. When the wave hits the ionosphere, it's going to kind of scatter a little bit and come back down and not necessarily polarized the same way.
So in order to talk to somebody like this, I know, normally you have your antenna and you go and you talk and you talk however far away that you're going to talk, and if you get tropospheric ducting or something like that, you're going to get farther. But when you're talking about, basically shooting it vertically and bouncing it back down, do both ends of the conversation, do they have to have their setup in a, I guess, quote, NVIS format?
No, not necessarily. I mean, any antenna is going to give you some vertical propagation. You're just increasing that effect. So instead of putting your antenna up and pointing a Yagi out across the ocean and trying to get some DX, you're kind of just bringing it in and bringing it more local. So most of your signal is coming up and coming back down, or straight back down rather. Whereas with a Yagi, you can still hear people off the side of the beam or off the back of the beam sometimes. It's just not going to be as you're going to have some attenuation on those signals that are outside of that range.
So does this sorry, my brain's kind of fried right now. Does NVIS work better on like 80 meters or 20 meters or 2 meters, or is there basically a certain frequency that you should try and stick with? I mean, I know that 80 meters is better for short range and 20 meters is better for longer range, depending on the time of day. But is there, I guess, just a certain frequency that's best for this type of operation?
Yeah, the lower frequencies, generally between 3 and 10 megahertz, are where this works the best, and it has to do with the critical frequency that the ionosphere can handle at that time. And there's some maps online that you can find out, or you can look at, and that will show you what the LUF and MUF, the lowest usable frequency and maximum usable frequency, and also the critical frequency. And generally, depending on what time of day it is in the area you're at, it's going to be somewhere between 3 and 10 megahertz. I was looking at it last night, and it looked like we were right under 4 or something like that. So you're thinking 4 megahertz, right? Being able to use below that would be 80 meters. And most of the time, I've had most luck with this sort of propagation on 80 meters. I guess you could say, 80 meters would be better during the night, 40 meters would be better during the day, but I don't think 40 meters has been really active for near vertical incidence for a little while just because of the low sunspot issues or activity.
So the I guess the sunspot cycles and the propagation problems that everybody's having on HF right now, I guess really that affects NVIS just as much as it does the standard operation.
Sure, you're still bouncing your signal off of the sky. It's just now you're trying to do it in a more of a local way than trying to skip across the ocean to get some DX or just across the country.
So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our talk with Ben here, a little bit more about NVIS and kind of maybe deeper dive a little bit on how to set up a station and how to actually operate a little bit. So stick around, y'all. We'll be right back after a word from West Mountain Radio. Do you have an old-fashioned voltage or amp meter hooked to your station? Are you looking to find something that has more bells and whistles? Check out the West Mountain Radio Power Check. The Power Check has 8 display modes, including voltage, current flow in either direction, wattage, and amp hours, and will measure from 0 to 60 volts with 40 amps continuous load. It is accurate to within 10 millivolts and 10 milliamps. It has a backlit graphics LCD that will display data in digital, analog, and bar graph formats. You can even monitor your battery backup with a programmable gas gauge. The non-volatile memory stores more than 100,000 data points without power. That's nearly 2.5 months worth of data at 1 point per minute. It has a USB computer interface for configuration and data download, and you can program it to sound an alarm for overcurrent, over and under voltage, and amp hours. The software that comes with it allows you to program every aspect of the Power Check operation, such as data logging rate, display formats, and alarm conditions. You can display current, voltage, wattage, and amp hours in real time. It has an integrated charting software that automatically collects and displays data. All the data can be downloaded and stored for later analysis. If this sounds like something you would really like, make sure you head on over to everythinghamradio.com/WMR and check it out. And if you do, and enter the code EHSUMMER at checkout, you will get $50 off of your purchase. Normally the Power Check runs $184.95. If you enter the coupon code EHSUMMER, you get a $50 discount, and that comes to $134.95. You can't beat it. The offer expires September 30th, 2017, so make sure you head on over and get yours before the coupon expires. Also, don't forget to pick up your free USB port monitor with your purchase. Again, that's everythinghamradio.com/WMR for more information. Hey y'all, we are back with Ben, November 8, Bravo Delta, and we are talking about near vertical incidence. I can never say that word. How do you say that? Incedence? Incedence, yeah. Near Vertical Incidence Skywave, or NVIS. That's what I'm just going to go with NVIS. That's just a whole lot easier for me to say. Anyways, we talked a little bit about how it actually works in the last segment. This segment, we're going to let's kind of go a little bit deeper, I guess. Maybe what are some of the advantages of using NVIS over standard propagation types?
Well, like we were mentioning before, standard propagation, you're really trying to get your signal out there and bounce it and try and get out as far as you can. The main advantage of NVIS is close in range and being able to navigate in really rough terrain. So, the signal's coming up and coming straight back down, almost in like a cone shape. So if you're out, say there's a mountain that you need to get your signal across, but in a normal situation, going that 20, 30 miles would be fairly easy with VHF or something, but with that mountain or hills or whatever in the way, you can set your antenna up down in the bottom and bounce your signal up off the sky and straight back down. So in emergency situations in mountainous areas, it's been used to, get from one side of the mountain range to the other and keep your communications running. Whereas, normally where I'm at here in the central Ohio, it's pretty flat. So, I can use VHF pretty much out to its limit. whereas in other regions and other areas, having the ability to bounce your signal off of the sky and bring it back down is advantageous. It's been used by the military in a lot of the different operations that we've done throughout history, whether they're in a jungle or in a mountainous area, being able to keep their signal kind of close in and just work in the area that they're working in. It's one of the main advantages is being able to use the sky as your reflector.
Yeah, I kind of imagine that would be a whole lot easier for disaster response. If you wouldn't really have to worry about the infrastructure of the repeaters and stuff like that. And if they can go up to 300 miles, or 400 miles, it would be pretty well any state except for maybe Texas.
Well, yeah, if you go and you look at Google Map, from where, I guess the center of Texas, you could go pretty much the entire state and, cover it with that. Where I'm at, I could reach a good chunk of the northeastern coast and, up all of Michigan, all of Indiana, a good chunk of Illinois, most of Pennsylvania. So, I mean, it's a pretty good range. It's not huge range, but it gets you out there pretty well.
So is there anything that you can do with it? We're kind of getting off the advantages and disadvantages, but is there anything that you can do to make it maybe a little bit more directional, I guess maybe is what I'm looking for?
Well, not really. You got to kind of think of it as you are using a very directional antenna, almost like you're using a dish or a Yagi or something. But instead of pointing it in a particular direction, you're pointing it straight up. And the sky in this instance kind of works like a mirror with these lower frequency signals, and it just reflects it straight back down to the ground. So if you think, if you take a flashlight and shine it up on the ceiling, it kind of fills, that part of the room with a low light, rather than pointing it across the room where you're, shooting your signal out and going a farther distance.
Well, it's kind of a bummer, you'd think it's like, of course, I have no idea how this actually works, other than just, pointing it up and going back down, but,
It's a pretty simple concept, and it's for the purposes that, you can use it for, it works really well. And that's not to say that if you have an antenna that's strung like this, you're not going to get DX or things like that. I mean, for the longest time, that was pretty much the only antenna I've used here. I just had it kind of strung across behind my house, maybe about 3 feet off the ground. I used, what do you call them? The step-in portable fence posts. It's just like a little fiberglass post that's maybe sticks out of the ground about 3 feet and has little hangers on it, so you can hang, an electric fence or something to keep in some horses or whatever. And I used those, a couple of those, strung them up, and like I said, this antenna was about 3 feet off the ground, but I was working stations as far away as Italy with it, so yeah, most of my contacts were local, but every now and then the atmosphere changes and you can get out there regardless of what antenna you're using.
It just baffles me because I figure when I think of a long wire, or random wire, whatever, I would think that the transmissions go out equally in all directions, and of course the radio waves that go down are going to hit the ground and be absorbed or be refracted or reflected or something like that. But I wouldn't really. I guess I just don't get how it makes it go up. Because I would think that it would still go out sideways and it would go up, but I don't. I guess I just don't see how it makes it more directional where it goes up than out. I don't know.
I would say, yeah, this is where you get into, I guess, some physics that I don't quite understand either. But if you think of how a Yagi is directing a signal, it's similar to that. you've got your main element that you're putting your power to, and it's reflecting off the back one and being directed by the other ones. And through some magic of how it's all spaced out, it forms the waves so they kind of compress and send in a particular direction. You're kind of doing the same thing, and as you're bringing, like I said, I think that the optimum is supposed to be about 1/8 of a wavelength up in the air, and that's where the waves, as they are bouncing off the ground and interacting with each other, will start to fold back and head almost straight up, like 75 to 90 degrees up. As you go lower, it changes a little bit, but like I say, it's really kind of hard to practically measure because it just kind of works most of the time, regardless if it's 3 inches off the ground or 20 feet.
Kind of like a J-pole. It shouldn't work, but it does.
It just, yeah. Why? Well, it just works. We'll leave it at that.
Don't ask why. Just kind of like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, is there any other advantages of using NVIS over conventional?
I've always liked them just because they're so easy to set up. You don't have to throw anything through a tree and worry about getting your antenna hung up there and not be able to get it back down. You don't, like I said, with where I'm at, I'm out in the middle of the center of Ohio. It's flat. There's pretty much cornfields around. So, if I guess I could sling it on the corn, but other than that, there's not a lot of trees. So, just laying something out on some small fence post or something like that, it was a real easy way just to get up and on the air. Recently, our club, the Ohio Valley Experimenters Club, participated in the Ohio State Parks on the Air, which is just a contest, kind of like the National Parks on the Air was, where you're trying to contact all the different parks in Ohio, and you get a multiplier for them rather than every other contact's just a single point. So we're trying to work in the area of Ohio, and this is a perfect style antenna for that. So what we did was we went down to the Buckeye Lake and set up one of these near vertical incidence skywave antennas literally on some fence post right at the edge of the lake, just strung it across, and we did pretty good for the amount of time that we worked there. I think we got 18 contacts in an hour, and I think 15 of them were other local parks, and the other couple were some other people who were in Ohio. So it worked really well for what we were trying to do.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I can totally see the ease of it. Does it matter if the wire is cut to a certain frequency area, or does it still pretty well work with a tuner? Does that affect it at all?
Well, it's like any antenna. I mean, if you're cutting a dipole, if it's 40 meters, it's going to be around 65 feet, I guess. If it's at 80 meters, it's probably going to be around 130 feet, end to end. Maybe a little shorter, a little longer, depending on which frequencies you're working with. So it's still a standard antenna. You could take this same antenna and hang it up in the trees. Although I believe as you come down towards the ground, the frequency that it resonates on is going to change slightly. So, using a tuner is probably helpful, unless you are specifically designing it to be that and permanently installed in that area, and can sit there and tune the antenna real well for that spot of ground that it's going to be working with. So you could use, like, say, a dipole, or you could do a random wire as the other really simple one to do. And for 40 and 80 meters, somewhere between 68 and 74 feet, with a short counterpoise, 20 feet or so or less, or a really solid ground. You can just kind of run that out and tune it up and go from there.
Now, could you use that was the word that I seem to remember, and I was going to ask you about the counterpoise. Can you use that as kind of a directional way to do it? If I put the counterpoise, if I have the antenna going north and south, and I put the counterpoise, to the west side of the antenna, will it direct the transmissions more to the east than to the west?
If you're, I'm not completely sure. Uh, I mean, most of the radiation is going to be coming off of the active element, and the counterpoise is kind of acting as a balance on your random wire. So yes, changing it is going to change the propagation. I'm not quite sure how severely it's going to change, because with the NVIS, you're already directing most of your signal straight up. I would suppose you could change it slightly. You'd have to just experiment, test it out, and see what your results are. I don't know.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good experiment. So all y'all out there that want to experiment with this, experiment with it and let me know. So we talked about the advantages. What about the disadvantages? Is there any disadvantages over standard operation?
Well, like I say, it really does cut down on your range most of the time. I say there's always those odd incidences where something opens up and you can get out there. But really, it's just bringing most of your signal into a fairly tight pattern around 300 to 400 miles out. Disadvantages otherwise would be, deer, people, things like that. If it's a low antenna that's permanent and get hung up in it, if you're transmitting and you're putting power into it, you don't want somebody out there by it because it is real low to the ground. You don't want to cause any RF burns or anything like that. So there's some safety issues with it. As far as propagation goes, it does what it does, and if that's what you're looking for it to do, it's all advantages. The disadvantage is if you're trying to reach, Japan or something like that, you're probably going to have a much tougher time.
Okay, so is it like, is there any really kind of, power that you typically have to put through to operate? It's like, I gotta have a kilowatt of power in order to do this, or can I do it with QRP power too?
I would imagine you could put a kilowatt into it. Being that low to the ground would be kind of scary. Myself, I've never put more than about 100 watts into it. You're not trying to reach out across the planet most of the time. You're working locally, but again, the way the atmosphere is working at the time, and how, I guess, reflective you'd say it is, or what time of day it is, how much the sun is affecting the atmosphere right above you, it will change, and it will eat up some of your signal. With the near vertical incidence, you're going through the D layer a lot at a sharper angle, so you're losing less of your signal than you would if you're trying to skip into it and say go across the ocean, where your signal will be in the D layer for a longer amount of time, and that'll eat up some of your signal a little bit more. So I feel like lower power always works well, and like I said, I've never really run more than 100 watts anyway. And that's always worked really well for me for trying to get a hold of anybody I wanted to in the local area.
So I guess really it's just like anything else, use the amount of power that you need to get the job done.
They should use the lowest amount possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ben, I guess that pretty much wraps up what I have, that wraps up all the questions that I had anyways, and I think we did a pretty good job explaining about what NVIS actually is and does and stuff like that. So I guess that's pretty much it. So is there anything else that you want to add to this? I mean, you want to tell us maybe where people can find you online or anything like that?
Sure. I think we've pretty well covered all of NVIS. This concept is pretty easy. You put your antenna low to the ground, your signal's going to go up and come straight back down in the local area. That's really all you got to remember about it. If you want to get a hold of me, I guess you can reach me at n8bd@arrl.net, or you can find me on Twitter at n8bd_.
N8bd_ on Twitter?
Yeah. Some guy came in and he stole my call sign before I ever had it.
Seriously? That's just so wrong.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I thank you very much. Does your club sell those little cards that we were talking about before? I mean, can you go online and sell those too? Can anybody buy them?
We don't have an online shop right now. Our club has been making it's basically a ID badge. They're good for I guess if you were going to be involved in any sort of MCOM, or if you're going to the Hamfest or whatever and you just want to show off who you are. It's got your picture on it and your call sign on the front, and some logos if you want any of those for, say, Aries or ARL, NTS, National Traffic System, NTS, or Skywarn, things like that. But the interesting thing that we've been doing is one of our club members wrote a program that takes the entire FCC database and will generate a reference copy of your license that we print right onto the back of it. And no, we don't offer them online right now. There's some plans in the future that we might be able to get something like that going, but right now we're just offering them at Hamfest. We've been at Dayton, we've been at some of the local ones around in the Ohio area at Milford, and the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Hamfest that was yesterday morning. But other than that, that's the only place you can get them from us anyway right now. But that's one of the things that we're working on. It's just kind of a fundraiser to help keep our club funded.
Right. Well, hopefully you can get those up online somewhere and get to sell them and stuff. If you do, let me know. Shoot me an email, and I'll definitely put a link on my website. And let y'all know about it so y'all can order it, because it's a pretty neat little card that Ben was nice enough to get me made up. So, Ben, I guess that is pretty much it. I thank you very much for coming on and talking to us, especially on short notice, and especially here it is 2:30 in the morning. I normally don't do this at 2:30 in the morning, but circumstances were just right, and the interviewee was just right. So, thank you for coming on and talking to us.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you for having me, and I hope we'll catch you again sometime.
Absolutely. We will see you online, or you'll be hearing me when you're driving down the road or something like that whenever you listen to my podcast. So until next time, sir, I appreciate it. 73 to you.
Hey, thank you. 73.
Hi, this is Dan, KB6NU, author of the No Nonsense Amateur Radio License Study Guides. My study guides have helped thousands get their license or upgrade to general class or extra class, and they can help you too. What makes them unique is my no-nonsense style. I don't bamboozle you with a lot of text. Instead, I give you just what you need to know in a simple, straightforward way that's designed to help you pass the test. One reader even told me, your study guide explained in a couple of paragraphs topics that the license manual needed a couple of pages to cover. Another wrote, the clarity and simplicity of your descriptions blew the license manual away. My study guides are available in paperback, in a variety of ebook formats, and even as audiobooks. Get your copy today. Go to kb6nu.com/ETHR for more info. Thanks.
All right, y'all. So that pretty much wraps up this episode. I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Ben, for coming on and talking to us about NVIS. I'm not even going to try to say that word. I just don't know why I can't get it out. Also, I want to apologize to y'all. I noticed that there has some background noise, and what it is that because it's basically 3-4 o'clock in the morning when we're recording this, because he works nights and I'm working nights right now, we couldn't really get together except for this, so I brought my microphone and stuff to work with me and recording it here in my office. Thankfully, it's dead at night and nothing's really happening. But anyways, the air conditioner, the vent is like right above me, and I don't really have a whole lot of control over the AC. It's like in a locked box, so kind of stuck with what I got, so I can't really turn it off easily. So please forgive the sound quality of this episode. If you're hearing the in the background, I apologize. Hopefully I won't have to do this anymore. Hopefully I can do it at home and with my little studio. And but anyways, Ben, thank you for coming on and doing this in the middle of the night, even though there is that little sound quality issue on my end. I wanted to mention a couple things before I close, though. Like I mentioned at the top of the hour, or the top of the show, rather, I am trying to start a wood carving business, I guess you could say. Building the signs and stuff that you've seen me post on Facebook and on Twitter, and on the Facebook, or on my blog posts and stuff. Trying to make, do some sign carving, make a little extra money on the side for my family. So I've got the special, the launch special. There we go. Finally found the words there. Anyways, the launch special for the wooden plaques that goes on until the 30th. So this podcast comes out on the 28th. You have until the 30th to place your order to get the 50% off discount, and that's basically a 11.5 by 6 inch sign or so, and you can have your own logo on there, whatever logo that you want. Probably will be able to do something if it's not really detailed or really elaborate. Should be able to do it no problem, with your name and your call sign on it, or just your name or just your call sign. Did one recently, not too long ago, for I want to say W5NIK, I think, for Nicholas. Thank you for the order for that, and I hope that you enjoyed the sign. I spoke with him a couple days ago, and he hadn't picked it up yet, but hopefully I'll hear from him soon, and he'll let me know what he thought about that sign. But you can get it at my swag store at everythinghamradio.com/swag store. Send me an email with your logo. Let me check it out first before you do, to make sure I can do it. That way you'll be happy, and then go over to the website and place your order. Also have the desktop call sign nameplate things that I'm making as well. So both of those are right now $15 until the end of the month. After the 30th, the wall plaque will go up to $30, 30, maybe 25. I hadn't quite decided yet, but probably go up to about 30. Also, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Robert Bond. He was generous enough to give me a donation through PayPal. Thank you very much for that. If you want to do that, you can go to everythinghamradio.com/support, and there's links on that you can support my website. There's also a link at the bottom of the show notes to give a donation as well. Also on Patreon, if you would like to become a patron of this show, you can do that very easily. You can also go to that address, everythinghamradio.com/support, and there's information on that as well. Or you can click on the little Patreon button on the sidebar of any page on the website. I've had a couple supporters I want to give a quick shout out to. First off is Brian Stanford. Brian has been with me now for a few months or so, giving me a donation for every episode. Well, thank you for that, Brian. And recently, I know I've mentioned this before, but I have a new patron, Sterling Coffee. And his call sign is November 0 Sierra Charlie. He is the co-host of the Phasing Line podcast. He also has his own YouTube channel and his own blog, and you can find links to those in the show notes of today's episode. Speaking of links, I want to kind of give a call out to everybody. If you have a amateur radio blog or a YouTube channel or anything like that, please shoot me an email or Facebook message or something like that. Let me know what the address is and what the name of it is. Let me check it out, and let me add it to my links page. I'm trying to gather as many links as I can to other amateur radio content creators. This hobby is all about community and spreading word, spreading information and news and learning things, and that's done by community, right? And there's plenty of people out there that make some great content that not everybody knows about. I recently found I looked at Sterling's website. He's getting back up and going again, making videos and blog posts. There's another one that I can't think of off the top of my head that I just started looking at as well. So there's plenty of people out there that make some great content, and if you're one of them, please shoot me an email, k5clm@everythinghamradio.com, and let me know what your website address is for your blog or YouTube channel, or if you're going to start a podcast or whatever. But I'm going to put all those on the links page on the website, so it will help y'all, my listeners, find some other content maybe that you want to learn something about or something like that. So I'm updating that. I'm updating the website a little bit with some other information. Got some new stuff going on in the swag store and all that. So been kind of busy. And on top of adding some extra stuff to this, I'm also kind of taking away from something, okay? And I've mentioned this in the last couple episodes, but I wanted to reiterate. I actually mentioned it at the top of the hour or two, I believe. But this is the last weekly episode. This one will come out on the 28th, and starting next month, I'm going to be going to a bi-monthly podcast, meaning twice a month. The next podcast episode after this one will be on October 12th. And then we'll go every 2 weeks after that. So, as you may know, unless you're a first-time listener here, my wife and I recently adopted 4 beautiful children, and with the adoption and a bunch of stuff going on at home, I'm kind of burning the candle at both ends, so to speak. So I'm cutting back on this a little bit and maybe paying a little closer attention to my family, a lot more closer to attention to my family, with that, and with the sign or the wood carving business as well. It's taking a lot of my time, so cutting back on this, building up on some other things. Family first, absolutely. I totally understand, and I hope you do as well. I know Kale over at Ham Radio 360, he's taken a total sabbatical from podcasting until after the first of the year. So, Kale, I feel your pain, my friend. But anyways, I guess that pretty much wraps it up. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Check out the show notes. And thanks again, Ben, for coming on. And thanks to all of my patrons and those that donate through PayPal. Last but not least, if you want to help support this podcast, you can simply shop on Amazon using my affiliate link, which you can find in the sidebar as well. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you very much for listening, and we will see you on October the 12th, where we will talk again with Vance. We're going to talk about the worldwide flora and fauna. So until next time, y'all, this is K5CLM 73.